All right, my friends, how is it going? This is your boy Nathan Crankfield, and I'm excited to dive into a little bit more of the financial mentality, the financial mindset that we've been talking about for the last several weeks. I think just kind of give a quick recap. We've been talking about stay-at-home moms, and one of the big things you hear a lot when you talk about stay-at-home mothers is just how impossible it is for everyone to have a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home wife, or how impossible it feels for women to be able to leave their job because a lot of women are breadwinners for their family. And we're obviously in a tight economic situation. Inflation is crazy. The cost of eggs, milk, like just the basic necessities for food and living are absolutely insane. And so I've been wanting to get into more and more content about providing, especially from the man's perspective, and talking to married couples about how they can make this work. And then for you unmarried people, I think a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is good setup for you, whether you're a woman who's working and think you want to work forever, great. You want to at least have the option that if you are a career driven woman, that maybe when you're a married working mother, you may want to stay home or at least cut back on your job. So we're going to talk about ways that we can set that up. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to all of our new local supporters. I think we had 22 new supporters join, which is really exciting. And we were on our our goal is for 50 new supporters. So we're still a little short of the goal. Technically, we're actually 38 short of the goal. So it's a little bit off, 28 short. But hey, if we hit 28, we'll keep going. So we have just 3 months until the deadline, September 1st. If you're interested in becoming a local supporter for as little as $10 a month, you can join us at seekingexcellence.locals.com. And we would greatly appreciate that. And so feel free to go ahead and join us there. If you like the content here, I want to keep creating more. I have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that are coming down the pipeline. And so we'll get into some of that as well. So it's been kind of funny as I've been talking about these things in my own life and in creating content for families that are interested in this and talking about providing and getting after it. We are also in the midst of this, right? So I'm going to give a little bit, today's going to be mostly focused on my kind of financial testimony, if you will. And we got into Emily's story, the last episode that we did together on this. And so I'm going to talk about more of my story, my journey. But I just want to say, kind of jumping ahead, obviously you guys know that I now have a stay-at-home wife. Super blessed to have that. And it's a blessing, but it's not just luck. I think that's something that a lot of people need to understand and appreciate. It's a blessing, but it's not exclusively luck. But just since we've done that, right? We started this year in 2024 to give some idea of our timeline. I'm actually going to go back even further. When Emily and I first were going to get married, when we were engaged, I told her, I said, most likely if we're moving to Denver, which was the game plan at the time, I said, we're not going to be able to have you stay home right away if we're trying to have kids right away, which was our goal and our hope. And so I'm like, if we have kids right away, you're probably going to have to give me a few years, right? You're going to have to work, let's say 2, 3, 4 years. We had a kind of a 3 to 5 year range that you're going to have to work after we have kids. Now, I know that's not your ideal. I know it's not your goal, your dream, but I think that's just the reality of what we're going to have to do because of the fact that it's so expensive to live here, right? We're looking at houses. The median home price in Denver is, I think, in the 550s, depending on where you're at. In Denver, I mean, if you get over to Aurora, it's a little bit lower, but you're talking about, 450 to 5 still. And then you're talking 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8 if you're getting into Littleton and Inglewood and stuff like that. So really expensive. And so I'm like, you're going to have to work for a couple of years. Then we have the baby and she goes back to work for a month and she's like, I can't do this. So I say, okay, let's find you a part-time work from home job or just a full-time, almost full-time work from home job. We originally were going to have her have 2 part-time work from home jobs. The one never really came through and had like a lot of consistent hours. But the other one, she was working for West Coast Catholic for a while and really enjoyed it, really loved working there and with the team there at West Coast Catholic. But as time went on, she still felt like the demands of just having meetings and she was working with their product and customer service and all of that. It was still causing her a lot of stress. And the worst part about it, and I've read this from other women's testimonies as well. There was a popular female Instagrammer, Catholic Instagrammer, who posted about this just a few weeks ago and the week before the Bucker stuff came out, ironically. And they talked about how it ends up being rough on the child. Now, this Instagrammer wasn't talking about the same way Emily felt, but Emily's experience was feeling like she was getting short and impatient with Jordan because he'd be interrupting her work time. right? And just kind of having that, right? Like where you're starting to take the kid and the kid is now adapting to your lifestyle versus you adapting to having a child, which, you can talk about that. We can discuss that. So Emily says, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So then our plan is like, okay, we'll have you step back and then we'll have you help with seeking excellence, and do some of the things that I'm doing. And then she was, still kind of stressed out by that. And so we ended up kind of fully pulling her back from working to where now she fully focuses on things of the home. Now with that shift has to come less time with me at home. I think what we were kind of really trying to get at in the last podcast episode is a lot of people are stuck in their kind of fantasy life, their fantasy world that they're hoping to create, they're striving to create. And Emily is very vulnerable and honest and humble to say that she was one of those people, right? She was somebody who, when we first started dating, thought that I was too focused on money, wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, wanted to live in Denver, and wanted to have nice things. And I said, okay, you talk me through how I can work for 35 hours a week. You can stay home and not work at all. We can live in a nice home in Denver for, let's say, $750,000 to $1 million. And just walk me through the process of how we're going to make all that work. I was like, I'm not even mad at you, but just like, maybe you know something I don't know, and you can kind of walk me through this. And this is something I feel like a lot of people don't understand or appreciate, is that in order for your kids, you got to understand this trade-off of math, right? So say currently both parents are working. Emily and I are both working. She's commuting. Back then it was about 30 minutes to work. So she's gone, let's say, for 9 hours a day. I was gone, I'm gone anywhere from 8 to 10 hours a day, depending on what the day looks like. I have a really short commute, but I have a lot to do. So I'm gone. Let's say I'm gone for we're both gone for 9 hours a day, right? Between work, commute, all that stuff. When Emily comes home, Jordan now is getting an extra 9 hours a day with her. What that has led to is me having to work a little bit more, a little bit harder, a little bit extra, right? To get things like promotions. I just got a promotion at work last week, which was really exciting. Technically my second promotion of the year. This one's a little bit more full than the last one was. Promotions, taking up other opportunities as like contract work, whether that's speaking or other things that I'm doing in my life, when opportunities come along, jumping at them. Let's say it increases my work from 8 hours a day being gone to 10 or 11 hours a day. That's a 3-hour trade-off of my time that Jordan might not get to get an extra 9 hours with Emily every day. Just the math on that just makes sense, right? And it's a sacrifice for dads. It's a sacrifice for moms too. It's not as much of a sacrifice if you're somebody like Emily who really yearns for it. I wouldn't call it a sacrifice. The work itself is a sacrifice. The work itself is difficult. But I think it's more of a sacrifice for the mom who loves her career, but loves her children more and decides to stay home. Emily wasn't that person. There's people who make a bigger sacrifice to actually do that, where this is more of like Emily living her dream, even though living your dream sometimes is still difficult and challenging and requires a lot of you. But I think we don't recognize enough that the trade-off there just makes sense, right? For the kids to get 2 hours less a day with me, to get 8 hours more with Emily is worthwhile, right? For them to be with their parents, to be with their family, to be at home is awesome. And so we saw that, and we just think that it makes sense. And I can basically, and I'll get to this. I don't want to jump ahead. I'm sorry, I'm really scattered because I didn't make a great outline for this. But we currently have this 5-year kind of just grind period in our life that we're in. I truly believe, and this is just some mindset stuff for men out there, your 20s and 30s are just grind years. It's just the reality of it. Your 20s should be grind years for your career mostly, and then you're obviously going to start hopefully having a family in your 20s. For most of us, that happens in the back half of our 20s. So really, when you're in college, it should be an absolute grind. College is not meant to be a 4-year vacation. College is meant to be the time where you set yourself up to absolutely crush it as you get out of college. Then you get out of college, you transition into the working world. And what else are you doing than working as hard as possible from 22 to 25, 27 when you get married? Then maybe you pull back a little bit. Your first year of marriage, you're kind of like really prioritizing your relationship and all that stuff. It's important. Maybe you have your first kid, you have some paternity leave, maybe. And you're starting to figure out, you're giving yourself some time to kind of balance And maybe you're making those transitions where your wife's staying at home or you're figuring out your life or whatever it might be. But then as we get into our 30s, like your 30s, I think should be your hardest your hardest decade as a man. Your 30s should be your hardest decade as a man because it should be the culmination of all the demands of your life. And it kind of sucks. I've heard men talk about this. Like, we wish we could set it up differently, but you just can't. So it would be nice, right? It'd be nice if you could put your most valuable years of your career at a different time than the time where you're having the demands of your social life are still kind of popular, right? In your 30s, you obviously have a marriage, you're starting to have kids, and your kids are the most demanding that they'll be throughout their entire lives. Your presence is a little bit more valuable as a father, I think, in your 40s. When you're actually providing counsel, information, and discipline and all those things. You can still do some of that in your 30s, but you're going to do that more as they get into their teenage and young adult years. But you still have the demands of, like, they're in diapers. Your wife needs the most help, right? You see dads when they're in your 40s, it's a little bit easier to go golf on the weekends, right? Because your teenage kids can entertain themselves. They can do whatever they want. They might be going to hang out with friends. They might be playing their own sports. They have their own hobbies. But like a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, like, you got to be with them all the time, right? They can't just like be self-sufficient and just do their own thing. Even when you're home with them, like a lot of the time you have to be entertaining them actively. And so that's pretty exhausting. So all of these things kind of culminate in your 30s and are the most demanding, right? This is the time in my career, as it is for most of you guys out there in your 30s, where like opportunities are starting to pop up. Your career kind of takes from that, starting positions. You're kind of in those starting positions. Maybe you make some changes in your 20s. I know I did. I was obviously in the military, and then I worked in a Catholic nonprofit, Dynamic Catholic, and then worked at a Catholic university, and then joined a for-profit company in Hallow. Started working in sales. I've been there for 3 years. So I was right before I turned 28. I was 27 when I took the job at Hallow, about to be 28, like 2 weeks later. So you have this kind of journey, right? Where you're jumping around different careers. Now in your 30s is when you want to really start to have a plan. You have a better idea of what you're good at, a better idea of what you're passionate about, a better idea of what people will actually pay you for, and you can start to create a plan. And this is the time to create the plan and really work the plan diligently. And so Emily and I have created this game plan for the next 5 years, at least next year. We're kind of on this schedule where the plan is for me to work 8 to 10 hours a day and like half days on Saturdays, with 1 weekend off per month. It's kind of like the standard. Now we get opportunities and other things come up where right now I'm working just a ton. There's just so much to do. I feel super behind. I wasn't even sure if I should record this podcast today, but I'm like, I promise you guys great content, and we're trying to build the supporters to see if we can keep it going come September 1st. And so I was like, okay, I'll take some time to record, but I'm going to be working this evening after dinner. I didn't see Jordan last night, like after work. I only saw him in the morning yesterday, and I didn't see him this morning because I had to leave for a meeting to be at work at 7 a.m. I have another 7 a.m. meeting tomorrow morning. Emily is speaking this weekend at a conference. I'm speaking next weekend at 2 conferences. I'll be gone for several days. And so you just have this, these opportunities, these things that come up, and it's just a grind period. But I think that's important to share because I think just so many people, so many men and families just think of it as like it should be easy. And the reality is that nothing that's worth doing is easy. And I know that there's some times where it's out there and some people have caught a bad break. And I think that's probably 20% of the population, where you could actually tell me you're a married couple and you can't make it work for the wife to stay home. And you made good financial decisions going to college, good career choices coming out of college, and that the husband is actually working his butt off. I think that it's very, very rare to see that. Now we can't retroactively go back. I talk about all these different phases because I know my audience is in that range of 18 to 34 is like 80% of the audience. And so I do like to talk about college and setting yourself up for success, early career stuff. But the thing that should be existing throughout is the hard, like the serious work ethic. And I think that's where a lot of men are lacking. And some of the wives who reach out to me on social media, some of the men who reach out and talk about how hard it is, a lot of these guys are just not working hard. And I think that's something that is really, really powerful and a big shift of what I'm trying to share and why I want to be vulnerable and open and transparent with some of this stuff. I'm probably going to be more transparent in locals with a tighter community than I am just to the general world when I start getting into numbers and things like that. because I think those practicals are actually helpful. You need to have like the actual testimonies, and I'm working on getting some guests who can kind of share their stories. But I heard a great podcast by Alex Hormozy this week, and he was talking about this reframing, right? He said he talked to a guy and he was asking, how many pieces of content are you putting out a week? He was like, my content's not growing. And Alex asked him, okay, how many pieces of content are you creating a week? How many different ads are you creating? Whatever. And it was something like the guy said 5. And he asked Alex, like, how many are you doing? And he's like, we're doing 50 a day. And so this guy was doing 5 a week, while Alex was saying that if you want to be really serious about this, you should do 50 a day. Now, this isn't to get into like, social media marketing. So I'm not telling you need to do 50 social media posts a day. And there's interesting strategies on how Alex goes about doing that. He talked about it a little bit in the podcast. But the point is that this is what happens a lot of times, where men will say, oh, I'm not able to do that. I can't make money, all this and that. And they'll complain. And then they'll be like, well, how many hours a week are you working? And it's like 40. And it's like, okay, of those 40 hours, how many hours are you actually working? Because the vast majority of people, there's crazy stats out there on these quiet quitters, right? On the number of people who are at their job but aren't actually working. They've basically given up. They're disaffected. They're disassociated from their job. And they've just kind of quit, but they stay. They basically do enough work to not get fired. And what we should be doing is striving to see, for how much I'm getting paid in my job, how can I absolutely crush it? Most jobs, I truly believe this, maybe this is controversial or debatable. I truly believe you can crush most, especially stay-at-home jobs, in 6 hours a day. There was times, a lot of times last year, where I was working in my sales job and hitting my quota and being one of the top salespeople and working 6 to 7 hours a day. What it demanded was that I had a very focused 6 to 7 hours a day. Not 6 hours of, oh, I got to get coffee. Oh, I'll stop and talk to a coworker for 20 minutes on my way to the bathroom. And I'll take an hour and a half lunch. And then I'll kind of meander around and scroll social media and do this and that. It's amazing how much time we waste as humans, right? The amount of time that we just absolutely blow, just scrolling, chatting with people, doing all these things. You have to be a little bit more savage in what you're picking and choosing what you're going to do. And sometimes that means you don't talk to the really talkative person. You say, hey, I'm sorry, I got to go. I got a lot to get done. I'll catch up with you later, though. You can be kind and say no. And that doesn't just mean you say no to the person who's trying to constantly chat it up with you. Sometimes it means you have to say no to the pickleball league or your flag football or softball or any of those things. I think about this all the time. Like, I'm almost morally against young guys in their 30s golfing twice a week. Like, what are you doing? I love golf. Don't get me wrong. I would go to the driving range if I could every day. I want to be good at golf so bad, and I'm very, very, very below average at golf. I have my clubs. I live very close to a golf course. It's a public golf course, so don't get that. Don't get it twisted. But I just don't understand these guys who play every sports league, golf, several times a week. And it's like, what are you doing? Even if you're in a place where you're doing like financially okay, you can still do better and not just be like using this time just like effing off. I just say like so many people just like screw off so much of their time. And there's just like so much work to do. Even if you're like, oh, you're too obsessed, you're too focused on money. There's so much volunteering to do. How do I justify golfing 3 times a week and playing in several sports leagues, but I don't volunteer at all? And there's obviously guys out there who are golfing and volunteering, and great. But I think you just we have to start to create certain boxes you have to check so that you're actually earning things. We've just kind of lost that mentality and this concept of like, I need to earn stuff, right? Eric Thomas, one of my favorite motivational speakers, used to talk about this all the time. He'd be like, you're going out, you're partying every weekend. And he's like, what are you celebrating? He's like, your career is stagnant. You got mediocre grades. You're not doing anything with your life. And you're celebrating every weekend, partying. He's like, no, you should party when it's time to celebrate your wins. But if you're not creating wins, what are you celebrating? What are you doing? What are you doing going out? Why are you drinking 3 nights a week? You haven't hit a goal in 6 months. So what are we celebrating, right? And if you just get to a point where you're starting to hit your goals on a regular basis, let's take it to the next level. Let's set higher goals and let's start to get after it. And I think this is what a lot of that ultimately comes down to, right? It's that Classic Dave Ramsey quote. Live like nobody else now, so in the future you can live like nobody else. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't recognize. And I hear this from a lot of the families who do end up commenting on my content and do share that, hey, we're making it work. We've been, stay at home, living on 80K, 5 kids, whatever. It's like, you don't like it. To me, it gets so disrespectful to those families when people say that it's only for like the rich and famous and only these people. We love being victims. We love getting the cop out for ourselves and being able to remove any responsibility or pressure on ourselves to do these things. But the reality is that a lot of these families are really living tight. They're really taking care to, be intentional with their finances. They're taking care to make sure that they are being good stewards of what they do have. And they're working really hard and they're, getting after it. And I just feel like a lot of people don't recognize that. They don't realize that. They don't see that. And there is that. You don't always have to have that. Some people are able to make, some husbands are making 250K. And so they do get to have stay-at-home wives who get to go get their nails done all the time and have nannies or cleaning people and golf every weekend. That's amazing. For most of us who are making it work, there's some type of serious sacrifice. There's some type of, for us, like we've talked about before, having the Airbnb in the basement, right? But a lot of that also comes back to the idea of, this kind of relates back to a little bit of what I said before about, if you listen to my episode from a couple weeks ago about the fact that we need to choose our morals before we're tested. The same thing goes here, where you got to choose the options you want to have before you're forced into deciding one of those, or before you actually want them, right? There's a reason why farming is such a good analogy. It's a reason why I think Jesus used so many farming analogies as well, is just the fact that we have to recognize that farming is so applicable. The parables are so ideal for the financial world, because a lot of times what people are trying to do is they're now trying to reap what they did not sow. So you have families now that the husband went and did the fun thing, whatever that might have been for him, out of college, or he did the nice thing, which may have been going to be a missionary. And there's many people, maybe God's calling you to be a missionary. I think there's definitely a number of men who go and become, and probably women, who go and become missionaries because they don't know what they want to do next in their lives. But say you want to give a mission year, go do a mission year, go do 2 mission years. What do you do after that? You went and became a youth minister. Okay, that's fine if that's what you wanted to do. And maybe that is what God called you to do. But we have to start to recognize, if you do that, then you're likely not going to have these options later in life. And so you shouldn't be complaining and blaming other things and other people for the fact that you don't make any money when you chose to not make any money. That's the kind of stuff that I think doesn't make any sense. That's where you're getting into these spots where it's like, this is really, really illogical. And so you have to be willing to say, okay, everything that I do now, are you spending your money now, or are you investing your money now? Are you spending time thinking about, okay, how can I actually create extra income? And so I want to give you some of my story on how I went about doing that, just to give you guys some context, because I think a lot of times people don't understand all that can go into this stuff. So taking you back on our story. So again, we had this whole conversation when we were engaged in dating, right? And it's like, okay, you tell me how you wanted to make it work, right? And then we are going through, we're kind of going through, dating, marriage, whatever. Emily gets a job at the Archdiocese. She's working in youth ministry, not a youth minister, but in youth ministry at the Archdiocese of Denver. I get the job working for Hallow. Now, when you take a sales job, you have to build your business over time, right? So I'm going to make a substantial amount more money this year than I made my first year in my job there. And so it takes some time to start to build it up. And we were brand new. We didn't have a sales team that was like up and running, that had momentum. We were kind of starting and building everything from scratch. Take that job. My first apartment here was hella expensive, but I do have some benefits obviously left over from the military. So we have some benefits from that. And so we knew that going into buying a home. So when we are still, we met with our realtor right when we got back from our honeymoon. And so right then we started looking for a house. Prior to this, I'm not kidding, for 2 years, I bet. What was this, 27? So yeah, probably a year, 2 years at this point, I had been listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast. Even before that, I'll talk, I kind of shared a little bit about my testimony and everything. And I'm sorry, guys, I do this all the time where I get my order of podcasts mixed up because I start recording something and then I get off on a tangent and then I get jacked up and start to get out of control. So basically, this podcast was going to originally come out before or after well, I started recording this thinking it was going to be after my testimony or whatever, my kind of journey, but I'm just kind of all over the place. So forgive me. Anyways, so for a year or 2 years before we even started to look at homes, I had already read the Dave Ramsey stuff, already been interested in money things, but I got turned on to the Bigger Pockets podcast. And so I'm listening to the Bigger Pockets real estate podcast. I think it's the number one real estate podcast in the US. I'm crushing Bigger Pockets and listening to these stories and these entrepreneurs who have flipped homes, who have bought multifamily properties, all kinds of different stories. And they basically have several different episodes a week, some of which are them actually just sharing mindset from the host. Others, they're doing interviews, and the interview stories are just so good of how people went from literally being you and me to having millions of dollars in real estate. Every week they had a different story on. And some people were literally like teachers and janitors, and then they end up making it big in real estate. It's amazing. It's super inspiring. Those kinds of podcasts are so invaluable, and people just ignore them. You just don't listen to them. You listen to bullshit. You listen to, I almost said Pints with Aquinas. Pints with Aquinas is not bullshit. Pints with Aquinas is great. Catholic stuff you should know is great. Shout out to my boy, Father Sean Conroy. Theology is great. Stop listening to exclusively theology. I listen to Pints with Aquinas. I like Catholic stuff you should know. I read theology books. I don't only read them. You have to branch out into these other things. If you want to be obsessed with theology and only read and listen to theology, then don't complain to me about not making any money. So many people just don't try. There's no effort. So I'm listening to Bigger Pockets every week, a couple times a week. I read, I think, 3 or 4 of their books, right? By the time we start looking for a house, we get on the house market, and literally our budget is like $400,000. Now, if you had told me when I was a kid, growing up in a home, in a townhouse that was worth 100, I think bought by my parents for 100K, maybe 110, maybe 90. I can't remember the exact number. 1,100 square foot townhome in the suburbs of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. If you'd have told me I'd own a house one day that was worth $400,000, I would have really thought that I made it. I'd have been like, you mean to tell me I'm making 6 figures and I own a house that's $400,000? I've been like, how big is the pool? What's the basement like, right? Like I'd have been like, yo, I live in a 3-story house with a pool for $400K. That was the mindset that I had coming into all this stuff. So we're looking for houses. We can only afford basically to look in Aurora or things that are really beat down or like kind of closer to the city of Denver than we'd like to be, right? Like Denver address and not in the best part of town. So we're looking 400 to, I'm like, all right, we can kind of expand it up to 450. We see what we can find. We're finding townhomes. Fortunately, we have the dog. I love Luna, but it was kind of unfortunate at the time because that was like the biggest restriction. Is like none of these houses had yards. We found like a townhome for 450 that we did really like. We actually put in an offer on the first house. The sellers came back and I think we offered them like 425 on a 450 house. They came back and said, no, we're sticking at asking price. And by the time our like commitment expired, they actually said that they would take our original offer of like 420 or 425, whatever we offered them. But in that time period, it was like 5 or 6 days. We go to Mass on Sunday. Emily and I are driving back to our apartment from Mass, driving through our neighborhood we were in like the Glendale area, if you know Denver before. Driving back to our apartment, I see a sign for an open house and I'm like, what the hell? Like, let's just go. You know, we probably can't afford anything in this area. It's like the Cherry Creek, Glendale area. It's really, really nice. And you got some nice little homes in there. Probably can't afford it, but let's just look. What's it hurt to stop and look at an open house? Now, mind you, up to this point, I'd probably been in 10 to 15 houses. So we stop into this open house and check it out. And the realtor's just walking us around. And he's like, yeah, you know, one thing that's cool about this house, you actually would be able to put up a wall here and wall off this back door. The back door goes, you know, there's a little space. A lot of these houses in Denver will have a back door that when you open the back door, directly like across the way, you know, sometimes 5 feet across is the door to the basement. And he's like, you could wall this off and Airbnb the basement and live upstairs. And like, guys, I'm telling you, it was like the scales fell from my eyes. I was like, my eyes were open and I was like, my goodness, I've wanted to do something like that for the last 2 years. And now here I am buying a house and I didn't think at all about house hacking. And so finally I get to this point where I'm like, wow, you mean to tell me I could Airbnb the place that I live? And I'm like, we also have the VA loan. And so the VA loan allows you a lot of times to be able to put 0% down. And instead of 20% down, or a lot of times first-time home loans or first-time home buyers can get different loans for 3 to 5% down, which is still a hefty amount on a $500,000 house. 5% of 500,000 is still $25K. And a lot of times, if that's your down payment, then you got no room for furniture or anything else you want to do or any fixes that you want to make to the house. So we had a pretty decent size down payment like that. And I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Now our game plan is going to be to try to find something that we could Airbnb and do a little bit of a house hack. So that upped our budget substantially. So we made a huge increase in our budget. But I said, but the thing is, I said, I think that I can make the numbers work. And I'm telling you guys, I wish you could see my freaking Excel sheets that I made. It took me hours of playing around, messing around with it, thinking about everything from the cost of renovations to the estimated appreciation of the house. I actually should pull it up. Let me see if I can pull up my document real quick. I'm not going to show you the full document. If you'd like to see it, maybe I'll share it on Locals or create something similar to share on Locals. I have tabs here. So I got this document pulled up. I have tabs here that I started to run, and I have it mainly filled out for our current house. Home value and the appreciation on the national average and the Denver average. I have target numbers of what we could make as an Airbnb if we rented it as a 2-bedroom. I have what it could make as a long-term rental if we were able to rent out the entire house. I have our loan pay down in an entire spreadsheet with, 8 columns here. By year, beginning balance, interest, principal, ending balance, estimated home value, gross profit if sold. I have the long-term rental numbers, as I said, whether we rented it as just a basement as a long-term rental, or if we rented the full house, or if we rented it as a 2-unit. So this is hours and hours and hours of research. Reservations by month. How much can we make as a short-term rental? If we're in the 25th percentile of a 2-bedroom Airbnb in our neighborhood, how much will we make? 50th percentile, 75th, 90th percentile. I also broke that down alongside the monthly house expenses, put that, juxtaposed that to our current monthly rent at our apartment, which for a 2-bedroom apartment was $2,500 a month, and was rising by 10% that next year to $2,750 for a 2-bedroom apartment with a garage. So I'm doing all this math, right? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, the goal is to figure out, we're hoping to have a baby, right? The goal is to figure out how in the next 2 to 3 years can I replace Emily's income. I don't think Emily would mind me sharing. It wasn't a ton of money, but she was making $50,000 a year. I also knew that I was increasing my house expenses by going from renting to buying. But I said, you know what? If we could Airbnb our house and make as much money that would kind of bring us at least back to around where our apartment is, I said, I think if I hustle and increase my money at work, my income and speaking and other things, I think we could actually make this work. I think we can make it happen. So I told you I went from about 10 to 15 houses. I had seen probably 10 to 15 houses at this point when I have this kind of fateful moment at this open house that we weren't even planning on going to. I think that I stepped foot in. I had a count. I think it was 47 houses by the time we actually bought a house. That was setting foot in them. Think of how many hundreds, if not thousands, I actually looked at on Zillow and the platform that our realtor used. People we called, talked to. I did a lot of work. And then getting the house was just the beginning, right? Because once I got the house, then we had to basically take our entire, what we could have used as a down payment, and renovate the entire basement. Get things up and going, right? It took us 8 months or so to actually get things up and running. All while we're also doing the nursery, getting ready to have the baby, all that kind of stuff, right? Paternity leave, I did a lot while I was on paternity leave. And we're just hustling. Then we start the Airbnb, and Emily has to go back to work full time. I'm working full time. Half the time I'm doing sales calls. In between the sales calls, I'm flipping laundry, cleaning the basement, doing the things as we're starting to welcome guests last summer. And that's the kind of stuff that by the time Emily goes back to work, right, we're able to have, this is a year later, 3 years after I listened to my first real estate podcast, I've been reading books and helped me to understand the platforms that I could find to actually run the numbers and make the accurate estimates. 3 years later, after all that hard work, after going to all these a year after going to all these open houses and house visits and showings and all that stuff, 10 months after I've started doing the renovations and painting and pulling up the floors and all that kind of stuff, Emily tells me she doesn't want to work anymore. That month, we made around, let's say, $3,500 to $4,000 on Airbnb. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And people look at it and they'll say, you're able to have a stay-at-home wife, blah, 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 blah. If I was rich and famous, whatever. Or if you lucked into things. There's no luck there. This is the shit that people don't see and people don't talk about, people don't think about. I went to war for the sake of having the VA loan. That shit wasn't just a gift, right? It wasn't just thrown upon me. I wasn't just thrust into having the VA loan. I went to war for the sake of that. Coming out of going to war, I started taking a keen interest in real estate and started learning about it and starting to understand some of the basic concepts, understanding the tools and resources and mindset that goes into actually running something successful like a house hack. Then I do all this work to find the right house. Then I have to do all the work in the house just so I can be ready for when my wife says, hey, I think I'd actually like to stay home part-time. I say, you know what? No problem. You can stay home part-time because this has replaced enough of your income that we're going to actually be okay. This in conjunction with me getting out of working from home and being a lot more productive in an office that I now rent and crushing it with my sales quotas, I'm actually able to cover it. So don't even worry about it. You can stay home and work part-time from home for a few months. Crush it for the rest of the year. Get as I mentioned, a slight raise and promotion at the beginning of the year, kind of cover what Emily was making take home before. Start to get things going with speaking, getting more speaking engagements, which helps to supplement and to cover it as well. All of this kind of stuff, these are the kind of things people don't think about, and you guys just aren't getting creative enough. And then when you actually have the trust in God to say, look, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to set this down. I feel like you're calling us to this. We're willing to follow your lead. We're willing to follow your will for our lives. We're going to do it. The first time we had that conversation, we actually said Emily could stay home from work at the beginning of this year before I got the raise and promotion. We say yes to the Lord. We say, hey, we're going to have Emily stay home. God, we just ask you to give us opportunities. I get the slight raise and promotion that almost exactly covers what she was bringing home from a part-time job. Then in the next month or so, I get another opportunity of somebody reaching out. They're starting a company. They want me to be a part of it. Nothing is solidified in that yet. Could be very lucrative. Could be amazing for our family. Could be nothing. But what it did was me saying yes to that. I have had meetings recently, traveling, meeting with some of the guys who I'm thinking about starting this company with. And it's gotten me jazzed, riled back up, energized about some other ideas and things that I had that could help us to make more money and create basically a separate business. So even if it doesn't happen with them, I've kind of got momentum going again in making this happen. While I'm down in Phoenix visiting these guys who I'm thinking about starting a company with, another guy calls me here in Denver with an opportunity to make some substantial money doing some things that I'm like, well, I've never done that before, but I'd love to try. And so now we have the opportunity. Who knows? Again, nothing could come of this, or quite literally with this next opportunity, we can make some pretty life-changing money. And what has happened? Why does this stuff happen? Because I read, I develop myself. I think that the three main core competencies, the three main core habits I talk to you guys about all the time: prayer, reading, and exercise. Because I try to, when you do those three things, you're the type of person that somebody wants to work with. And again, I'm not talking about reading your BS novels that you're reading. It's not to say that all novels are bad. Obviously, if you're reading some of the classics and things, there's goodness that comes from that. But you're not going to understand how to talk generally about real estate deals by reading novels. You're not going to know generally how to improve someone's sales process by reading novels. You're not going to understand basic fundamentals of investing and cap rates and personal finance by reading novels. You have to do some of these things, right? It's worth it to listen to a crypto podcast once a week if you're interested in opening to investing in crypto. It's worth it to listen to a real estate podcast once a week. It's worth it to listen to some business podcasts once or twice a week. This is how you're going to expose yourself and start to develop your mind and open your mind to see opportunities where they exist. Many people are just blindly going through life thinking about just working a 9-to-5 and just working 9-to-5 forever, and think that you should be able to make $250,000 doing that. Or you're foolish enough to think that even if you can make a 9-to-5 make you work or earn you six figures, that's going to be enough to live. It's not. And your target is going to help you either hit or totally miss the level of income and the comfort that you want your family to have. I remember having a conversation with one of my brothers. He's my only brother that makes any substantial money. Only sibling really that's gone on to be like truly financially successful, and he's absolutely crushing it. He's like a junior partner at an insurance company, at a major insurance company. I don't want to talk too much about his life, but I told him, man, this was probably 10 years ago. I came to him telling him that I had this dream that I was going to make six figures one day. I was going to make $100,000. I was like, can you believe that? I was like, I'll make $100,000. And he was like, that's what you want. That's like your dream. That's your goal is to make $100,000. I said, yeah. And he's like, why would that be your goal? I was like, because that's a lot of money. And that's how my family thought. That's how I was brought up, to think that $100,000 was a lot of money. And there was times in human history where it was. We're just not in that time anymore. So people have done the debunking of a lot of Dave Ramsey's percentages and all these different things that he's doing, because he wouldn't agree with crypto. He wouldn't agree with Airbnb. There's certain things where you have to be a little bit more aggressive in today's world if you're going to make it happen. And you might fail. That's part of business. That's part of money, that nothing's guaranteed. But that's the risk that you take to try to take these big swings and make these things happen. Is you might invest, even if it's not crypto and all these different things. Say you're just starting a business and you're trying to invest in the business, right? I started seeking excellence with the mindset of saying, all right, I just want this to be a ministry. Now I'm trying to actually turn it into something that's worth doing for my family. That if I'm going to sit here and have a week like this week, where I'm in between travel weeks, life is absolutely hectic, I'm about to be solo dadding it for the weekend, then I have to say, okay, this has to be actually worth my time now. I've given you 300 hours of free content. That was my mission work. Now this is actually something that we want to see be profitable. I'm not losing money on it anymore. This is part of why I said to you guys, hey, if you enjoy this content, if you want me to keep making content, if you want me to expand and grow and do better things, then you got to join and support at $10 a month. And if you can't do that, that's fine. If there's not 100 people who believe in it by September 1st, then I'm not doing it anymore. That's been the commitment. Why? Because there's so much opportunity. There's so many things that are happening. I got to start to prioritize my time correctly. And I'm not trying to make this where it's my full-time job and I'm making, like some people I know, I've heard from people that the Tim Gordons and Taylor Marshalls of the world and even Matt Fradd, they're able to do really, really well because they have a lot of people who support them and believe in what they're doing. And I say good for them. I'm not mad at them. If they're making content that people find valuable and people want to support it and they give them a lot of money, I think it's awesome. I think that's a great thing for people to be able to do. I think it's better than us. Social media companies are selling your attention to ad companies and making tons of billions of dollars on ad revenue on your attention. Here you have somebody that's going directly to your attention and not just taking your attention to F off with it, but trying to form you in some positive way and asking for $10 a month, where these social media companies, TVs, all the, TV stations, all that, they're making tons of money off your attention. We're trying to add value to your life. And if you find it valuable, then you decide to support it. And people can continue, they can grow, they can have better studios, they can have better guests and interviews and content, create courses and coaching and all these other things that can actually help to transform people's lives. But we got to start to understand this, guys, that there's a lot of different things that you can do. There's going to be risk in all of it. But if you're not working hard, if you're not really busting your ass, then I don't want to hear about the things you're not able to do financially. You don't get to go to brunch every weekend and golf twice a week and play in every sports league and play video games for 2 hours a day and then tell me that you're not able to make it happen. Put down the video games, put down the golf clubs, put down these other things, and let's use our 20s and 30s to get after it. And then we have our 40s and 50s. I hope to be golfing 4 times a week in my 50s. I don't want to wait till my 60s to when I'm washed. But in my 50s, I'm hoping I really only like going for 9 holes. I'd love to golf 9 holes 4 times a week. And I'd love to be in a situation where I'm able to do that, where I can financially afford that, where I've added a ton of value to people's lives, to the marketplace, where I'm in a place where I can just kind of kick back and chill. But how do you get there? You don't just get there overnight by just hoping and praying. You have to actually go out and put in the work. You plant the seeds, you pray that God blesses the seeds, but you still got to work the soil. And so don't think that this stuff just comes easy. It's not just natural. It's not just going to come to you. Now, I'm probably not going to have time to record another podcast to do these in the order that I wanted to do in. So I'm still going to do my financial testimony thing, but I just got kind of all out of whack and I'm really in a crunch right now on time. I have to write some talks. I have 5 talks I need to prepare, which is wildly overwhelming. So I got 5 talks I need to prepare and just a lot of content to create, a lot of work to do. This other opportunity that came up that is, very enticing and hopefully going to be lucrative. And just got a promotion at work. So there's not an abundance of time. So this is what I'm talking about, guys, where I like doing this. I want to keep doing it, but I can't keep losing money on it because that's not the season I'm in my life. I want to still be able to be generous with my church. I want to be generous with my community and giving time to people and meeting with people and mentoring people and volunteering and doing all that stuff. but seeking excellence is no longer part of my volunteer work. And so if you believe in this, if you like this, I encourage you to join. We're going for 100 supporters by September 1st. We have less than 90 days to get there, and we are currently at 62. So I want to see 100 people who believe in this and think that this is worthwhile doing. And if I find that, if I have that, we'll keep going, we'll keep growing, and we're going to keep crushing it. And we're going to have more content coming out. This month of June is going to be pretty crazy. So I would imagine the episodes are going to be pretty like this, pretty pretty hastily recorded. But then come July, I'm going to have more time to be able to sit down and really, really get into it and go hard. So appreciate you guys. Thank you again to all the new supporters who have joined. It means the world to me. I really, really appreciate it. You guys are the best. And I appreciate all the encouragement from people who have been reaching out saying, no, you can't stop. We don't want to see you stop. And I'm so grateful for you guys. I love doing this. I love recording. It's hard to make the time for it, but really, really do appreciate it. I really enjoy it. I love speaking to you guys. I love talking with you and getting to spend this time with you. I love that you entrust an hour a week to me. And I hope that it's helpful. I hope that I'm going to get more motivational, more inspiring, more practical, and really help you guys to figure this out and really start to seek excellence in our lives, because I'm about it, man. I'm doing some hardcore dieting stuff right now, hardcore hitting the career hardcore right now, trying to hit the family life hard, making time for dates, even in the midst of all this stuff. We just had a great date night last night, Emily and I. Been super prioritizing my spiritual life. Went to daily mass this morning in the midst of all this hecticness, trying to make time for reading and doing quick 10-minute breaks. So I did the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and just, guys, I'm really hitting a groove. Got a lot of momentum right now. Things are going well. Things are going in the right direction. And I don't want to stop. I want to keep going. I want to make it happen. I want to make it. I have so much I want to do with you guys. So much, such a big dream for seeking excellence. And so I hope that you'll be a part of it. And thank you to those who already are. All right. God bless you. Go out there and be your best. We'll see you next time.